Okay, so today we are gonna paint a little ghost. I'm using the Spooky Glow set that I made by hand. It's available on my Etsy shop, and you can see it's got pretty sparklies going on there. You can use whatever color you want, obviously. This is just what I will be using, and I also started off with a little bit of a sketch where I kind of made the outline of where my ghost is going to be and some hand lettering over the top. But I'm going to start with, get the pet hair off of my brush. I'm going to start with the lightest of the purples and then go from there. So I love using one of these palettes. My sister actually made this one for me out of clay or pottery or whatever. I don't really know how the whole process of that works, but she made it for me. And so I like to be able to use one of these so I can control the amount of water that I have with my colors. And I believe this is a size 8 brush. I just got it from Hobby Lobby. It's just a simple round brush. So I'm going to start with the lightest of the purples and just go fill all of my ghost in and use quite a bit of water as I go because I want it to be a light color so I can layer on top of it. So the pencil that I used is the one of those water soluble ones, so it disappears when I paint over it, which I love, but also makes me nervous. So this doesn't obviously have to be perfect. It's watercolor and is meant to be a little bit messy. Just slap some color on there. And then I'm going to use a little bit extra of this and kind of do a wet on wet effect down this side because I'm going to have the light coming from over here. So we'll just add it in a little bit so that it'll just kind of let it bleed together. I am terrible sometimes when it comes to overworking my watercolors, so I'm trying not to do that too much, but I'm just gonna dab some. And then I'm gonna take a dry brush and kind of on my highlights, pull up some of that color there on that side. And then down here too. So we can kind of have that ripple effect on the sheets. That's dark there. So you kind of have to decide where you want your ripples to be. And we'll just kind of okay, and then now that this color has been sitting there for a bit, I want to kind of bring some of it up so it doesn't pool too much here. Should be good. And now we are gonna let it dry for a minute. So I already made a mess on my palm. So we'll let it dry and start back up again. Okay, we are back. It feels pretty dry. So we are gonna keep going with the light purple. If you're like me, I hate waiting for it to dry. So you could always use like a hair dryer or a little heater or something, or you can go do some laundry or something, I don't know. Okay, so what I'm doing now is underneath, there's 2 layers of this sheet here. So I am doing the underneath portion and just making it kind of give that ruffled layer look. And you just kind of want it to have this like natural ruffled layer look. And then this back of the sheet back here, just color it all in. The same purple, I'm still using the light purple, but just color it in for this deeper color here. It's kind of hard to actually talk and paint at the same time, but you know, we're here for the fun, right? Let's see, I think I want to bring this up a little bit here. And then with still the light purple, you don't want too much on your brush. We're gonna go in and kind of add these shadows here for where the blanket is ruffled at the bottom here. And one of the things I like to do is dry my paintbrush off a little bit and kind of go over, let's see, dry it off, and then that way it'll give the edges a softer look where you want them to be a little bit softer. And kind of dry brush it a little bit. You don't need a whole lot here, just enough to kind of give it some layers so that you can see, you know, push back some of the sheet and bring forward other parts of the sheets. And then we're also going to do one more dark layer over the top of this one. So you can make this one be a little bit thicker than you might originally think, just to add in those shadows. And you can do a little bit of dry brushing here too, like I am, just to kind of not add too much color, but just enough to give it that illusion. So I'm just kind of blending my edges a little bit. And then some of them I go a little bit higher than others, because if you think of like a ruffled sheet, they aren't all at like the same exact height. There's some that are ruffled a little shorter, some that are ruffled quite taller. Whoa, I'm being wild. Throwing my paintbrush around. So I'm gonna go up a little bit with this one, and then over here I'm gonna add one that goes up further, and then here we'll have one, and then here we'll have one that goes up to the side there. So this is how we're looking so far. I don't know if you can see that very well, but be kind to me. This is my first video, and it's a trial. Okay, so now that we've got that far, we're gonna make sure this part down here is dry, which mine doesn't feel too dry, so I'm gonna let it dry for a minute, but we'll be switching to the darker purple next, to kind of add in the rest of those darker colors. And if your paint has been sitting for a little while, if you're using Designs by Rachel Beth with the shimmers, you want to kind of like mix it a little bit, because some of the color will settle to the bottom and others will sit on top. So to get a consistent color every time, you just kind of want to give it a little swirl to make sure you've got a good consistent color going. Okay, so with this bottom part here, we're gonna kind of do the same thing that we did with the light purple up here when we added those strokes. So we're just gonna pick the spots that we want to be a little bit darker and kind of go up. And as you get to the top of the sheet, you can kind of bring it across that bottom portion of the sheet, because that'll naturally create a shadow there, just having the sheet in front of the other sheet, if that makes sense. So you can add some paint there as you go along and kind of paint these stripes up. And if you get something in a spot that you don't necessarily want it to be, you can use either a dry brush or you can use a paper towel and kind of dab some of that up a little bit if you don't want it there. I just realized that I had that in the wrong spot there. Put this here. I'm just a mess. Keep putting stuff in weird spots. And then I like to, blend the edges a little bit here too, just using just a tiny bit of water and color on my brush, but not too much. If you need to dab off the brush on a paper towel, you can. And you probably want to do it, every once in a while, because it's going to pick up the paint from your paper here too. So just continue to wipe it off on that paper towel a little bit. Going here. And then again, like with this top part, you can make these a little bit wider than you might naturally think about, because we're going to go in again with one more layer and add one more layer of some depth to that to darken just a little bit of the corners and edges. So now, as we let that part dry, we're going to take some more of this dark purple. And you don't want too much on your brush, just a little bit, because we're going to go in and just kind of add just like a line of paint here and there for these sheet wrinkles. And you can kind of make it a little bit thicker at the bottom and then go thinner as you go up. And then again, some of them are going to be taller, some of them are going to be shorter, just depending on where you want them. I typically don't like to put two tall ones next to each other. I'd prefer to have like a tall one and a short one, just to kind of and you can have a couple like close together too if you want. And then also you can have like a straight line and then have a little break in the line and then go up a little bit more too, just to kind of give it some interesting lines there. Have that one go up a little bit further. Short one. Then we're going to go with one that's a little bit longer here. And then I think I'll do just a little one here. And then one over here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this and make this line a little bit darker here, just because I feel like it needs to be a little darker. And then now we should be okay to add some lines to the bottom here too. It seems like it's dry enough. And if it bleeds a little bit, that's okay too, because it's in the shadow. That's a little too much on my brush. Just kind of add a little bit of line, a little bit under the sheet. Add a little line here. I'm going to turn my page a little bit so I don't get my hand in that paint. Just drop a little bit more paint into these spots. And then that is our ghost there. So as you can see, you've got the layers there. And then if you want, you can add some eyeballs to him. But for now, I'm going to do these, the lettering up there. So if you're doing lettering, we can do that now. If you are not doing lettering, you can skip ahead and add some eyeballs with me when I get to that part. But we want to make sure this is like super, super dry before we do that, because we definitely don't want any bleeding when we do that. So I am going to switch to orange now. And I'll do a clean paper towel too. I'm going to start with the light orange, and again, swirl that together to make sure I get all of the sparkles and all the colors that you want. And just kind of dab a little bit off of the brush there. Okay. I am still using a round brush. And hand lettering can be quite tricky, but just go slow. Slow and smooth. And this part I want to be thinner than the others, so I'm keeping it quite thin. And you'll want to consistently pick up some color too as you're going, because you want to keep it quite consistent. Let's see here. And I'm only doing this upside down because I am really good at putting my hand in my paint, so I'm just trying to keep my hand far away from that as I can. So this part is the main part of my letters, so I like it to be a little bit thicker. I'd say the hardest part about hand lettering is keeping a consistent width. But we're just doing this for fun, so just do your best. And I like to go over it twice just because just to give it a little bit darker color here. Okay. This part is so soothing to me. I just love the attention that this takes. I do think I'm going to turn this around now because I think that this is probably dry enough. And I don't like to push very hard while I'm doing this too, because I just want the very tip of my brush to touch the paper. That gives me the most control for where it can go. This is also where having a hair in your brush can be maddening. Then when I get to like the edges that I want to be a little bit thicker, I can kind of push down on my brush a little bit more. What I'm trying really hard not to do, which I tend to do when I'm painting lettering, is by the end, they slowly get thicker and thicker. So I'm trying not to do that and just keep it consistent all the way. But we'll see what happens. I like pulling my brush more than I like pushing it. It feels like the brushes are usually a little bit nicer to me. I took a hand lettering class one time, just a little like calligraphy class that came with like a little calligraphy pen, and it had some practice sheets there for us. And the one thing that really stuck with me was she said at the end of your letters not to have a rat tail that's just like sticking straight out there. So ever since then, I have tried to put a little bit of a curl or something to the end of my letters, because now all I can think of are rat tails. And it just doesn't sound pleasant, so I don't like to have rat tails. And normally when you're painting too, you probably want to like tape it down so it doesn't get all wrinkly on you, but I move my paper around so much that I tend to not tape it down. I've seen people use boards in those cases so they can move their painting around, but I just kind of feel stuck in my ways with this. I like it this way. For now. I need to add a little more water to my brush here. And if you want to, as you go through these letters, you can also slowly switch to a different color to give it like a ombre type look, or shift. I always love that look, but to keep it simple, I'm just doing the one color. All right, we're almost done here. And then we can go back to our ghost and put some eyeballs on it. Don't want a rat tail here. If you want, you can add some details with dark orange to the letters. I might do that later, but for now, I really like how this is, so I'm just gonna leave it. And then we're gonna go back to our dark purple and just put in some eyeballs. We're just gonna do some ovals, some cute little ovals for the eyeballs with using our dark purple here. Okay, so I'm thinking 2 eyeballs right there. Just do some. So we're just doing some solid eyes here, as if someone had just put some holes in the sheets. And if they're not both the same size, that's okay, because it's a ghost. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that process, and hopefully I will see you again.